Hey, before we jump in, real quick, this is the relaunch of Football is Money. We changed a few things up, just trying to make it better for y'all. But, if you've been rocking with us on the podcast platforms, if you've been tuning into our past live streams, then you already know how we get down. And none of that is changing, all right? It's still Football is Money. It's just going to look a little different moving forward. So I hope y'all enjoy it. I hope you rock with it. You know what I'm saying? And with that being said, let's the show begin.
Motion left to right. There's nothing there. Now he tries to run. Breaks the tackle. Dives for the end zone. Fumbled the football. Left sideline. Midfield. 40, 30, 20, 10. Touchdown.
Yeah, here we go.
Throws back of the end zone. There's C.D. Lamb.
Unbelievable.
We're back. You're listening to Football is Money on footballismoney.com. Here's your host. They call me boss.
Yes, sir. And normally, this is where we'll roll straight into the playback. Talk about every game, every result, everything that mattered across the slate. But this is week 18. And week 18 demands a different approach because last week wasn't about highlights alone. It was about context and how the games played out. So, we're going to put that on the website. You guys can go check that out, footballismoney.com. But stay tuned in with me right now. And because we're going to stay locked in on what matters the most. We're talking about fantasy football. Yeah, we all love it. And if you're still here in week 18, you don't need more games. You need better information. And that's what we're aiming for. Let's go to the fantasy playback and talk about the studs from week 17.
We're about to take it back.
All right, so first things first, play the people, not the names, right? This is what execution under pressure looks like. These players, they didn't just produce, they showed effort, they showed clarity and trust from their teammates, starting with Drake May, quarterback for the Patriots, 32.4 fantasy points, had a career day, 5 tutties. He was pulled out the game early because the job was done. That's momentum. That's trust. Derrick Henry, 45.6 fantasy points. Not matchup proof, but moment proof. 2 weeks, 68.4 fantasy points. League titles decided. Chase Brown, 29 fantasy points. Patient paid off. Running back one production when it mattered the most. Same for Ramondre Stevenson, 27.2 fantasy points. Efficiency over volume. Touches it don't have to be loud. It just needs to be lethal, right? Jamar Chase finally got back on the board with some touchdowns, 25 points. Didn't need 150 yards, found the end zone twice, and that's value. That is value. Chris Olave, 25 fantasy points, chemistry unlocked, and the production flowed. Zach Charbonnet, 26 fantasy points. Road clarity wins championship. Goal line work matters, and he got all of that. Malik Willis, quarterback for the Packers, 31 fantasy point. Low roster rate, but massive payoff for anybody that had him. That's why you pay attention late, and you got to see who's in and who's out and who's doing what. Next up, we got Jackson Dart and Wan'Dale Robinson. When teams let players play free, production usually follows. So this is the other side of fantasy right here, though. You got the same pressure, players playing on the same stage, same expectations, but when the moment hit, these names couldn't carry the weight. It wasn't about talent. This is about what actually showed up, right? Guys let you down when you needed them the most. Jahmyr Gibbs, running back for the Lions, 6.4 fantasy points. The volume was there. The explosiveness, it wasn't. 17 carries, 2.4 yards per carry, no splash plays. So Gibbs gave managers league-winning weeks earlier in the season, but when it mattered the most, the production dropped off. And for some, this was the final blow. Especially if you had your team named after him. All right, so touches, it don't matter if the lane disappear. The same thing goes for Josh Jacobs. 27% snap share, minimum usage. So this was the injury. Yeah, it was intent. He only had 4 carries, 1 solid workload, gone. Season momentum slammed at a stop at the worst time possible. With Green Bay locked into a playoff spot, Josh Jacobs become a bystander. When teams secure positions, sometimes the stars become spectators, man. CeeDee Lamb, 9.6 fantasy points. 10 targets, though. None of them paid off. None of them gave you anything that you can use. Back-to-back bad fantasy weeks. And now, no playoff motivation left. So, what do you do in that situation? This wasn't about usage. This was about, the script collapsing. Targets without urgency don't win you weeks. There ain't nothing really to play for. JG go off. Jared Goff, 2.1 fantasy points. Bro had 5 turnovers, 0 control. The Vikings exposed everything. Pocket panic, pressure issues, ball security, you name it. It was a nightmare performance on a championship stage. Man, feel bad for you if you had him in. Same thing goes for Jameson Williams. His running mate had 5.7 fantasy points. That's what you call collateral damage. When the quarterback collapses, the pass catchers follow. He had 2 catches, no rhythm, no chance. Wide receiver ceilings die when the quarterback floor collapses. That's something you can take to the bank moving forward. Or, sometimes it boom under, certain circumstances. But let's keep it moving. Devon Achane, running back for the Dolphins, 14.2 fantasy points. And that's the most deceptive dud of the week. He had 100 scrimmage yards, but no touchdowns, no explosion, no ceiling. This was his lowest output since week 7. He's been consistent all year, but consistency didn't save championship week. So yardage without scoring, especially from your top running back, that's fragile. Next up, Bucky Irvin, Tampa Bay running back, 8.3 fantasy points. He had 9 carries, no push, no momentum, no thing. Seriously, 3 straight playoff weeks under 10 points. As Tampa just seemed to be fading fast. Teams decline drags fantasy value with it. No other way to say it. We got Saquon Barkley up here again. 6.8 fantasy points. He got volume without the rhythm. 19 carries. No receptions. No space. Again, no thing. The Eagles' second half offensive collapse wiped out Barkley's fantasy floor. Yeah, even elite backs need offensive rhythm. You know what I'm saying? Can't just go out there and get it done if there's no collective offensive balance, so to speak. Like Kenneth Gainwell, running back for the Steelers, 6.8 fantasy points. Jaylen Warren, running back for the Steelers, 6.4 fantasy points. I mean, even together, this still is not enough. This was a perfect storm of disappointment. Both of these guys was expected to carry the offense, and neither one of them delivered. Cleveland shut all that down. So, matchups still matter. Cleveland's been a tough running defense, and, they shut them out. Same thing with James Cook, 8.7 fantasy points. First game that he had under 10 points since week 6, and it came at the worst possible time. He had missed goal line opportunities, and, but even with that, the Bills is still locked into a playoff position, and with teams that locked in, they kind of lower the workload from these star players. They want to keep them healthy going into the postseason. Let's go K-Trey. Kenneth Walker the third. 7.7 fantasy points. Week 16, he was the hero for your team. Week 17, he was a letdown for your team. The backfield is split. He had low efficiency, minimum receiving impact, and he just couldn't really get going. Zach Charbonnet stole the show, and it looked like it's a change of guard, right? And that's the danger of shared roles in playoff weeks. Role clarity beats the name value. No other way to put it. Ashton Genty, 9.3 fantasy points. He had a positive matchup. He had heavy touches, just didn't have any impact to the game. After his Week 16 breakout, this was a reminder that volume alone doesn't guarantee any type of payoff. Bad team cap fantasy ceilings. And that's all you can really say about this Vegas team. Now let's go. Jalen Hurts, 8.9 fantasy points. Weather, pressure, offensive shutdown, less than 50% completion, no rushing upside. The second half just erased everything, right? So when the conditions like the weather turns, these players' floor disappear fast, even for some elite players. That's the same game Buffalo was in, right? So, with those conditions, you kind of expect to see things turn out how it turned out. And, that's why Week 17 was really different. There's no cushion. There was no safety net. No trust in the name on the jersey to go out and deliver what you expect them to do. Some stars was protected. Some roles disappear. Some situation collapsed overnight. But if you're still playing, you can't play fantasy the same way. You have to play the people, the ones who actually be on the field, with something still to play for. All right. And that's how you're going to survive through Week 18. Value over name. And look, here's the real truth. And this is where people still get stuck. There are no exception names, not anymore. Lamar Jackson, he isn't the exception type, not for this year. He hasn't been giving you automatic elite weeks. There's been more down games than people want to admit, right? Josh Allen, fantasy MVP last year, but even he hit a rough stretch at the worst possible time. And matchups matter, man. Josh Allen against the Philadelphia Eagles, I guess we all should have seen that coming. That was a bad spot. And elite athletes don't always do elite athletes thing. And that was the point. Fantasy doesn't care about previous awards. It doesn't care about the jersey number. It cares about what you're doing right now and who you're doing it against. And that's value over name. Because this week, I think Trevor Lawrence would have been a great start. Tyler Shook, good matchup. He playing solid football. Drake May, red hot, perfect situation, right? But those aren't names that everybody is comfortable putting in their starting quarterback lineup, especially over, say, a Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson or something like that. You can't just run out the players everybody recognize all the time. You can't play fantasy off memory. You have to play it off current information. In this league, it changes every year. And now you're seeing the next wave of guys come in and dominate. You got the class of 24, the class of 25, young quarterback, these young skill players stepping up, taking roles and producing immediately. The game don't wait. And fantasy doesn't reward nostalgia. Some of the guys we love over the last 5, 6, 7 years, they getting phased out, man. Not because they bad, but because production always beats reputation. And if you don't pivot with the league, you end up like me, starting Josh Allen against the Eagles, trusting the name and taking the L in the final week. And that's the lesson. That's the lesson. You got to adapt, evaluate, play the people, not the name. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for us over here at Football is Money, man. I hope you enjoyed it. The next show, we're going to talk about starts and sits. So, man, I hope you love it. Stay tuned in. Rock with us. This is Football is Money. I'm your host. They call me Boss, and we are.
That's a wrap. Thanks for listening to Football is Money. Find every episode and more at footballismoney.com.